Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Ravi and I am going to explain you today Clinical SAS topic 29, that is what is a SAS macro, what are the macros used in SAS, what are the procedures, etc. things. It's a complete version. I am going to show you. This is a part 1. Soon I will produce the part 2 also. I will explain you in detail about the macros which are used in the SAS procedures, etc. things in this session. Okay. Here, what are the automatic variable macro variables? By writing the percentage put underscore automatic underscore in your SAS editor window, you will find what are all the SAS automatic macros present in your system. You can find out in the log. You can see automatic. You will get all these automatic macro variables. If you write in this one of, for example, ampersand sys date 9 dot, if you use this format, this already it was a automatic macro variable which are present in your SAS session, so it will show you the current date. Sys date means the current date. If it is 26 March, it will show this date. This sys date 9 dot format actually where we are using for the output generation. We need to give our current running date, so that time we will produce sys date 9 macro variable in the footnotes. So every time if you get updated the output, the date was updated. Okay. And what are the macro statements? If you are creating the macro, what are the statements generally we are using in the macros? One is percentage put. If you create any macro, if you want to see whether the macro was resolved, how the macro was resolved, we can get by using percentage put. If you write the percentage put and if you see in the log the clear explanation of the particular statement, you will find in the log. And percentage sys output. This sys output statement generally is a macro statement that is submitted in the client session to assign a value that is available in the client session to a macro variable that can be accessed from the server session. Generally, if it is used in the client location and our location, there will be a connecting link how the macros are you can run. We are not going to touch our standard macros, so they'll give some link between the standard macros and our local user macros. By using sys output we can rectify that. And sys call, you can see the following new macro statement invoke a SAS call routine. For example, percentage let a 1 2 3 4 5 6, we are creating a macro variable a and b variable is 0, and this ran uni function is used between the a and b. Ran uni function is one of many pseudo random number generations in SAS. In particular, ran uni is designed to generate pseudo numbers and the real between 0 to 1 with a uniform distribution. It was a something, randomly picking the numbers function between this a to b. By running this sys call, we can calling this function, and this function is work out between this a and b macro variable. In this scenario, generally we can use sys call. We can call the macros with sys call function. Okay. And what is the macro facility? The macro facility is a tool of extending and customizing the SAS system, and for reducing the amount of text you must enter to do some task. For example, if you want to do a task for repeated time, for example, we are going to do the statistics for various 10 type of variables, so no need to write the proc means for 10 times. Just create a macro variable and passing these all 10 parameters one by one will get the statistics for this all the 10 variables. So if you want to do a task repeated time, that time the macro come into picture, and by using this macro facilities you can reduce our time and produce an efficient outputs also. The macro facilities has two components. First one is macro processor and second one is macro language. Macro processor is the portion of the SAS system that does the work, and language is the syntax that you use to communicate with the macro processor. Okay, and replacing text string using macro variable. How to replacing the text strings by using this macro variable? For example, macro variables are often efficient way of replacing the text string in SAS code. If you see here, percentage let city is New Orleans. Okay, this text was assigned to city macro variable, and if you use in the title statement data for ampersand city, this ampersand city was resolved as New Orleans this text. So if you print one data set with this title, in the title this ampersand city was resolved this one and printed this New Orleans. Okay, data for New Orleans, the ampersand city was resolved into this macro variable. And keep in mind, if you use this double quotes only, the macro variable was resolved. Any macro variable, if you use a double quotes, then only it was resolved. And if you are giving single quotation marks, it won't resolve. It directly print what you are giving the ampersand city, directly it was printed as ampersand city only, and in the ampersand city this was the output. If you use a double quotation mark, keep in mind, if you are replacing any text string with using macro variable, that time generally we can use double quotation marks only. And by using this percentage let statement, this was the city macro variable is called global macro variable. We can use in the program anywhere we can use this macro variable. Those type of macro variable we can call it as global macro variables. Okay, and how to write a macro programming in the macro. Okay, generating SAS code using macros. First of all, we need to create macro variable, macro percentage macro, and we'll give some name for the particular macro we are giving. If we are going to do some descriptive statistics macro, just give the descriptive as a macro variable, so you can easily understand which macro is refers to. For example, if you are going to create so many macros within a program, so for the differentiate purpose, the purpose of the macro you are creating, the name should be equal to that purpose, then only everybody is understanding the purpose of the macro. Okay, macro and mn, macros ends with percentage mn, the same macro name. And if you want to call this macro percentage macro and the macro name, you can call. Between this macro and mn, we can write our macro programming. For the purpose descriptive means you can write proc means or proc summary etc things, you can write between the proc macro and mn. Okay, inserting the comments in the macro. In the macro we are writing the programming, but we need to include the comment every steps why you are writing the syntax in the macro, we need to understand. So there are two ways to writing the comments. If this was the general way in the SAS slash and star ends with star and slash. In the macros we can give the comment percentage star and semicolon. In this way also you can write your comment between the macro programming. Okay, and what is the macro definition containing several SAS statement? For example, this was a small macro plot, and this macro plot mn with macro mat, and in this macro the between the proc plot between the income and age, we are going to populate the plots between the income and age versus incoming plots we are generally doing. And in the temporary data set, in the in library we are taking the data set, and as per the condition, who are the age greater than or equal to 20, those subjects only we need to populate the income versus age plots. This was a temporary data set we created, and then we apply this macro, percentage macro. We are calling this macro here and proc print. So generally what happened, this data step temporary data set was resolved, and this temporary data set applied in this macro, and this plot was generated. Okay, and how this was resolved, you can see here, temper and age greater than 20 means greater than about 20 subjects is there in the temporary data set. Later the macro p plot means this macro was applied here, the same content resolved here, proc plot income versus age, and later proc print age. In this way the macro was, we are using the particular macro in the data steps, we can resolve, we can save our times. Okay, and passing the information into macro using parameters. So there are two types of macro parameters generally, keyword parameters and positional parameters. The macro variable defined in the parenthesis in a macro statement, macro parameter. For example, this was a macro and amend. We are going to pass income and age. This was income and age. If you, instead of this age, if you are something another variable, if you want to pass years and years underscore education. So generally if create this variable as yvar and this was xvar, just if you pass this variable income and xvar equal to age, this was resolved income versus age. If you pass this macro then that time this yvar resolved as income and xvar resolved as var's education. So in this way this macro parameters defined before the macro and calling those parameters in this way. Why we are calling this positional macro? If we are giving xvar in the first and yvar in the second also, it was resolved as it is. We are not going to give any particular position. So this was called keyword parameters. If you are giving equal to symbols like key symbols, it was keyword parameters. In the case of positional parameters, how we are giving, we are not going to any equal to symbol. How we are giving in the position, then we are giving as it is, like if you are putting yvar xvar, so the variables which we are passing in the macro generally in the same way which position you followed in the macro statement, in the same way you have to pass in the calling macro. So this was the positional parameters. If we are using our customization way, not following any position, in that case those type of parameters we can call it as keyword parameters. Okay, and conditionally generating SAS code. See here, this was the one macro, what's macro, info and my data. For example, if info equal to print, then do this, you can do, otherwise you can do this one. If else statement, in the generally in the data step, if else statement use in the macros, percentage if, percentage do, percentage else, percentage then. In this percentage we need to add, if some condition is meet this criteria, it was printed. If it is not meet this criteria, then this was created. How the data step if else statement is working, in the same way in the macros also there was a if else statement will work, but you need to give percentage if, percentage else. For example, if info equal to print, if we are passing info variable as print, if info equal to print, it was printed. In case if info is report, then this was executed. This was not going to executed. That time this was executed. If it's info equal to print, this was executed. Means where the matching statement is followed, those only will execute in the macro, remaining was not going to execute. Okay, this was conditionally generating the SAS code. For example, in the real-time scenario, they want only for example, male subjects descriptive statistics by using some macros. So just we are passing the data set if some sex equal to male, means this was filtered here, and those male patients only we have printed in the proc print. Otherwise these scenarios, one table is related to this print and one table is printed to report. So in calling the macro one more step, info equal to report, that time this was executed to one report, this was executed in one report. Just we are giving some ODS statement in the different way. So one macro is sufficient to produce multiple outputs. That time this scenario was used in the real time. Okay, and generating repetitive pieces of text using percentage do loops. For example, want to create these 5 data sets in by using the macro. Here you can see names 1 to numbers we are going to give 5 data sets, data. Generally what we are doing, data, some data set name. Here you want to create 5 data set at a time. So here do loop 1 to number. How many numbers? Ampersand number is resolved as 5. 1 to 5. Ampersand name, ampersand n resolved as 1. If the do loop comes 1, generally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 ends, then 2 will come. That time ampersand n resolved as 2, ampersand name resolved as DSN. So that time it was resolved as DSN2. Once 2 end, the loop will iterate and the n equal to 3. 1 to 5 we are giving, right? So 1, 2, 3. If it is the n equal to 3, that time ampersand name resolved as DSN and ampersand n resolved as 3. Once 3 completed, the loop will iterate once again, the n will go 4 and later 5. So up to 5 the loop was end because we are giving 1 to 5 only, right? So the 5 data sets were created in this way by using the do loop statement in the macros. It was reducing our burden in many scenarios. For example, want to do some 100 subjects, some statistics or anything. So the n equal to 1 to 100 means one by one the subjects go into the loop and checking our required condition and produce the required output. In many real-time scenario, the macros with do loops were efficiently resolving our issues. Okay, and here if you want add some suffix to macro variable, here ampersand name and ampersand n we was seen, but we want to give x, see DSN x1 x2 x3. If you want to give add some suffix, we need to put a dot between the two macro variables. Otherwise ampersand name x ampersand n means ampersand name x was not created. So ampersand name we are giving DSN, not ampersand name x, right? So we need to differentiate between the suffix and this macro variable and that macro variable. Before this macro variable, the suffix was added. So x1, x2, x3 was created. We are giving 1 to 3 here. So the 3 data sets were created. And how this backend process of SAS macro facility will work. We have backend, what happened to the macro processing. Just we are executing the macro and producing the data sets and outputs, etc. What was happening in the macro backend process? There in the macro terminology, input stock, word scanner, tokens and macro triggers, percentage we are macro programming, ampersand macro variable, and macro processor, macro symbol table and compiler. These 7 set of rules were executed in the backend. If you run one macro, what will happen to see in steps. First, creating a macro variable. For example, if you are creating a macro variable by using percentage let statement. Percentage let a equal to something Prasad means this Prasad text was assigned to macro variable A. Second step, to check the macro variable, percentage put underscore all underscore means what are the all macros will come into the log. Percentage put A means the A which was resolved as Prasad, generally the Prasad will showing in the log. And third step, data ampersand A set 3.demo run means ampersand A here the data set A Prasad data set was created here. Data ampersand A is nothing but we are creating a global macro, so the Prasad data set was created. Okay. And step 1, we are creating a macro variable called A and assigning the value of Prasad. Okay, checking that variable is available or not, underscore or underscore by writing the ampersand A Prasad variable is present or not by using ampersand all ampersand. We can check all the macro variables which are present in the session. We can check it by using ampersand A, creating a dataset called Prasad. You already know. So how the execution was happen in the backend while executing this small piece of macro. Okay, first we are when I executed my first step, the macro variable and its value stored in the macro symbol table. The value first showed in the macro symbol table. Input stock means we are giving the code, then that will go to the word scanner, then it will convert it into some tokens wise it was converted, and they will determine the destination means if you are calling ampersand A, for example we are creating ampersand A that was going to word scanner and keep it stored as a tokens, and if you are calling ampersand A the macro processor will work, and if it is a percentage means the program will execute. If it is a macro variable ampersand call, the symbol table will resolve, and what are the macro variable we are assigning that will show in the output statement. If we are calling the macro statement percentage macro, it will also the macro processor process the program and will execute. And finally if we the destination was using compiler means this was the execution step, this was the compiler step. Once we are executing the macro, this input stock, word scanner, tokens and the macro variable or program will execute, and in the compiler statement they will compile the macro everything and show into the log or in the output. Okay, when the word scanner encounters a macro trigger, it will send the token into the macro processor. Now the macro processor should resolve the macro variable or macro program. This macro processor will take help of macro symbol table. In the macro symbol table, all the macros which we are creating already store this one, and whenever we call the macro variable, that will search in the macro symbol table which was suited the macro, then resolve the macro variable and show into the compiler and show into our output. In the macro symbol table, the macro variable names and its name has been stored. Now the macro processor will paste the value of the macro variable and place it back to our input stock. Okay, and creating the macro variables and assigning the values. For example, percentage let name equal to carry means we are creating macro variable as name. The carry macro variable ampersand name is a macro variable. In the city we are assigning this ampersand name. Here we are creating another macro variable by using existing macro variable. Okay, and here if you write the percentage put ampersand name and ampersand city, how it was resolved. See, ampersand name was resolved as carry means already we are giving name as carry, and ampersand city how it was resolved. Ampersand city means Ampersand name means carry. Then only the carry was resolved in this case. So existing macro variable also useful to create the new macro variable. If you want to create the macro variables in the digit case, for example, percentage let numeric num equal to 1 to 3, and if you want total str 100 plus 200, how it was resolved? Percentage put num, percentage put total str. It was resolved as directly 100 plus 200 only. If you are expecting 300, it was not going to resolve as 300. If you want to do arithmetical expression, that time want to use some function SAS macro function. If you use percentage eval function between the arithmetic expressions calculations, percentage eval, then only it was calculated 100 plus 200 and creating the macro variable num as 300. If you want to do, this was a integer value. If you want to calculate with some decimal points on 0.56, that time this percentage eval was not giving the appropriate result. That time you can use sys eval f, the percentage sys eval f function, which will help to do arithmetic expressions which were having decimal points. And macro variable references. For example, percentage let street equal to maple, number equal to 123, address equal to ampersand name. Here ampersand name resolved as 123 and ampersand street resolved as Maple Avenue. Okay, if you put percentage address 123 and Maple and Avenue. Okay, in this case we can combine both numeric as well as character macro variable. And here 123 is the numeric, but it was the macro considered it was a character only. If you want to do math arithmetical, that time you use some different functions, but here this was a character only. Okay, the macro invocation. Invocation, the percentage let status equal to percentage weight and percentage put status. If you are giving any macro variable percentage weight, for example percentage street equal to maple, directly we are assigning the test to this variable. If you are giving some special character between this text, that time what happen, will get a warning. Apparent invocation of macro weight was not resolved because the macro is considered this percentage something, it was related to some macro programming, so that time they will not consider this special character. If you want to mask this special character and assign this percentage weight text to the status macro variable, we use some function called nrstr. This nrstr function will mask this special character. So directly if you writing status equal to nrstr percentage weight, and if you write the percentage put ampersand status macro variable, it was resolved as percentage weight. Without using this function, it was not resolved as percentage weight. Okay, value from the data step. For example, we are creating the macro variable by using the calls input method. Calls input method generally we can use in the data step. Okay, here SAS help dot class end equal to final, age greater than 10. For example, age greater than subject, if you want 20 subjects are there, 19 subjects are there, so n plus 1, counting the how many subjects are there greater than 10, 1 2 3 4 up to 19, and if it is ended means end equal to final, the final 19 subject, we are creating the 19th number as a macro variable. For example, want to know how many subjects are there greater than age 10, so going counting the number 1 2 3 up to how many subjects greater than 10, 19 subjects are there, so we are converting that 19 number into assigning the macro variable to particular 19 number. We are creating the macro variable if you are with that number. Okay, and putting an ampersand number, here ampersand number resolved as 19. Then in the footnote we can mention ampersand number observation having age greater than 20. If data updated, if one subject is added, that time no need to change the program, automatically it was resolved as 20, and 20 observations having age greater than 20 was resolved and produced in the output. Okay, in this way, if you use the macro variable in the programming level, no need to update the programming whenever the data was changed. Okay, and referencing macro variables indirectly, here you can see, here we are counting the, first we need to count how many country names are there. Here 6 is there, so creating the macro variable as 6 into m totes is how many total are there, 6 is there. So here macro variable we giving 1 2 3 4 5 6, so 1 to 6 we are creating. If you are resolving mcty means 1 means it was resolved as this one, and 2 is resolved as this one, 3 is resolved as this one. Here in this way we can give 1 to how many it is. Here we are 6, but how many unique is there? 1 2 3 only. 3 country names are there, means that time this mtotct resolved as 3, and here the macro variables we are creating 1 to 3 only, means if it is a 1 resolved as Ashland, and 2 it resolved as Bayfield, and it is 3 resolved as Washington. Why we are creating the macro variable? For example, now the data have only 3. In the future it was one country is added, that time if you are writing manual 1 to 3, the fourth will come, that time we will change the code every time. So in this way, if you create a total number as macro variable, so if the fourth country was added, that time this TOTCT was resolved as 4, and automatically 1 to 4 macro variables were resolved. If we are giving manually, that time we need to always checking the country names and giving the names, right? So in this way indirectly we can writing our dynamic code, so it will help to whenever the data was updated, no need to update the programming every time. Okay, here you can see they want to produce each country wise report. So how it was created? 1 to total. If it is 3, it was resolved as 3. The data updated, if we get 5 countries, automatically 1 to 5 countries. And ampersand means the country in the loop, I1 was coming to the loop, the I1 was resolved as 1, and mcty ampersand as resolved as ampersand mcty1 we resolved as the first country. In the loop was executed, and second iteration is come, that time I equal to 2, this I equal to 2 resolved, mcty2 means second country was resolved, it will produce the proc print of second country. In this way, how many countries are there, the loop will iterate until the required number, the total numbers, and produce individual reports of particular country. This scenario was, so many programmers are faced this situation, and they want to give sub analysis purpose, subgrouping wise tables. That time the proc report is like this. So the loop will entered and the loop will resolve, and how many countries are there. First country we are giving macro variable 1, second country we are giving macro variable 2 in the proc SQL statement in the before slide. So here this was resolved as 1 2 3 etc things, and every time it will produce the separate report. Okay, the loop will ends whenever we'll get required number, that up to that the loop will iterate and will produce the output. Okay, and using more than 2 ampersand, here just we are giving double ampersand. How it was resolved, if it is a double ampersand, that will resolved as ampersand and where, and ampersand and resolved as number. But if you are going beyond the 2 or 3, that time that was resolved as left to right, means first they will resolved as ampersand, second ampersand where resolved, and later ampersand was resolved. In this case, you can see ampersand resolved as ampersand var and ampersand and resolved as number. Ampersand var number equal to some number is resolved. In this case, triple ampersand, if you are using it was resolved as left to right. So the city is there and 6, right? The city 6 was not resolved here, and here ampersand var resolved as city and n was resolved as city. Ampersand city 6, if you create the city 6 variable, that was resolved. Here we are not creating any city 6 variable macro variable, so it was not resolved here. And manipulation of macro variables with macro functions. Percentage scan, you already people know the data step. We are using scan function to identify the word, particular word. In the same case, the macro function, the ampersand scan, here ampersand address was resolved as 123 Maple Avenue, right? So we want to pick the first word of the particular macro variable. So percentage scan and the first word is 123. Up to here the space is a delimiter, so 123 was resolved in this first word macro variable. Percentage scan, percentage substar, percentage replace, percentage try and word, etc. things which are used in the data step, the same macros which were helpful in the macros also, but using some techniques like your percentage or some conditions will apply for various macro variable functions. Okay, what is a global macros? Just now I told you percentage let. By producing the percentage let statement, we can get the global macro variable. We can use this macro variable anywhere in the macro. Okay, here percentage country is called CLAC, and the macro variable was created. This macro variable we are using here within the data step. Okay, here the how it was resolved, percentage ampersand country within the double quotation mark. Keep it in mind, the macro variables which we are the text format, that should be containing in the double quotation mark. Single quotation mark won't resolve the macro variable. Keep it in mind. And this macro country is resolved as Clark. Here you can see how it was the Clark and country, both the concatenating and giving the macro variable. Okay, and local macro variable within the macro parameter, percentage macro and percentage amend, within that one if you create something macro variable, that should be used in the function only. They are not going to use entire program. That type of macro variables are called local macro variables. Okay, percentage let holiday, we are assigning macro variable Christmas inside the macro. Percentage holiday, here they resolved as Christmas, but if you use this percentage holiday outside, it won't resolve. That time apparent symbolic reference holiday what not resolved warning will get, because we are creating the percentage let statement within the macro, so it was a local macro. We should use that macro variable within the programming. We are not going to use this macro variable outside the macro. If you want to use the outside also that macro, that time write the percentage global and macro variable, so that local macro variable will convert as the global macro variable. So that time global macro variable we used anywhere in that program. Okay, macro quoting functions. Some functions, generally these are the specific functions which we are using in the macros. Some are used in the data step. Generally by putting the percentage statement, we can copy from data step function to macro function, but some functions should be unique with the macro variables, that are percentage str, nr str, b quote and nr b quote, super q. What is the use of these functions? Will explain you. For example, in the string ampersand myvar is there. They have a macro variable. If you are using nr str, this was resolved as it is. This was not resolving as a macro variable. This nr str function masks this ampersand special character and giving the same value which you are giving as it is, you can resolve it as ampersand myvar. If you use instead of nrstr, if you use str function, it was resolved as ampersand myvar resolved as abc. Before we are creating this ABC assigned to the myvar, okay, myvar variable. If using percentage str, the myvar was resolved as ABC. If you don't want to resolve the macro variable, just you want to directly what the word is there in the text, as easily you want to put that word in the report, that time nrstr, where we can get this scenario. For example, in the titles and footnotes, some age and BMI is there in the title. We want to display that ampersand as it is, so that time the title and footnotes nrstr used, so that mask the ampersand character, and the age and BMI will as it easily the text will presented in the title and footnote. If you want to resolve, then str function will helpful. And in the same way, you can use text is investigators. Here you can see some quotation mark is there, investigators decision, and want to create the reason as a macro variable for this text. And if you use this reason macro variable directly, this was giving some error. We are not going to give this ampersand reason, because this was resolved as investigators decision, but there is a special character is there, so that time we are not going to directly using the percentage reason. We are using B code and ampersand reason. What happened, this B code, this will mask the special character present in the macro, and this B code reason not equal to missing, if the condition will work out in this case only. If the macro variable text containing any special characters, that time it should be valid quotation mark masking special character function, then only it was working. Okay, and quote and NBR code also same, but they have a specific functions. Here you can see A is begin, str, nrstr, B code and NBR code. What happened if you are resolving? A has resolved as begin, and nrstr directly this was not resolved. What you are giving directly produce the ampersand A. B code NBR NRB code also resolving the macro variable. Okay. Here NRB code and NRB code is an execution function similar to B code in the same special character. And what is the difference is, due to the fact macro variable resolved where possibly, but any ampersand and percentage signs. Here you can see calls input the TRT macro variable as creating A and B. A and B assign it to TRT. If you use NRB code, the ampersand B was not resolved, because NRB code directly giving as it is the masking the special characters of B and producing the same value. Okay, and super Q is used at that time. No need to give the directly we can assign the macro variable TRT. Okay, so directly the TRT was resolved as ampersand A and B, A ampersand B. Okay, super key use that time. Here we are giving some ampersand TRT, but in the case of super key, no need to mention the ampersand symbol. Okay, and nrstr, for example, A equal to A, B equal to MH. If you use nrstr ampersand A and ampersand B, if you are creating the ampersand C macro variable with substar of C12 and Q substar ampersand C1 comma, what is the difference between this ampersand substar and Q substar, percentage Q substar function? See here, nrstr function, if you use A and B was resolved. 1 comma 2 means 1 is resolved as not resolving, right? In the ampersand C, ampersand A and ampersand B directly populated in the log. In case of percentage Q substr, it was resolved AE and MH, right? In that first word is 1 starting with AE. Here you can see nrstr ampersand A and ampersand B. Ampersand A and B was producing, here percentage let nrstr used ampersand c means ampersand a and ampersand b was resolved as c. In case if you use substr, ampersand is 1 comma 2 means starting position is 1, 2 letters a was resolved. In this case, for example, why you are using substr function, where we can start how many characters we need to read, substr function used generally. Okay, and if you use percentage substr, directly they are masking the character, and where ampersand is first letter and a is the second letter. This was printed in the first case. In the case of qstr, it was resolved, and what the variables containing the values that was produced in the output by using q substr function. Okay. In case of eval function, where we can use do mathematical calculation, dose and frequency we want to calculate, multiply, that time percentage eval was used. Okay. Whenever we want to resolve the macro variables in their format, so you can use this q compress and compress and q compress. Also you can use compress statement used to compress the values, and q compress will resolve the macro variable which were there in the macro. See here, percentage dose is 5 and frequency is 3. Total nrstr, this dose into frequency. Okay. If you are using q compress, how it was resolved? Percentage eval, dose into means it was eval function we used. So 5 into 3, 15 was resolved as percentage total. So eq compress variable ampersand total was resolved as 15. And this compress 15. Okay. And in the case of q compress, it was not resolved directly, it was producing what the percentage total is there. This was the syntax directly printed in case of q compress. And what are the special characters generally handled masked by these functions? str function a and c. A means these special characters it will mask. C means unmatched or anything open and closing parenthesis also masked by str function. nrstr function a and b and c means b means ampersand percentage also masked by the nrstr function. In this way, these are the functions, these are the affected groups. Okay. If you like the video, please like, share and comment. If you want more interesting SAS Clinical SAS topics, please subscribe my channel. We will soon produce the part 2 related macros, SAS macros in upcoming sessions. Okay, thank you. Thanks for watching this video. For more interesting SAS interview topics, please subscribe my channel. Thank you.